back. You're watching a heated discussion here at the Confederation of Indian Industry. Clearly, you can see that there's a lot that we expect from Budget 2016. But Rajiv Memani, we're talking to domestic investors here, but as far as foreign investors are concerned, what should they expect from this budget? And any specific big-ticket items that you expect on the tax front, given the recommendations made by both the AP Shah Committee as well as the Justice Ishwar panel?
Yeah, I think on the tax front, I personally don't expect anything big ticket. I think I do hope that the Ishwar Committee recommendations will be accepted. Being part of that committee, I do hope that. I think AP Shah Committee also that will go through. I think there will be some things that the government will try to do. The poem announcements that were made last year. Hopefully that will, they will defer it by a year because the final circular is still not out. On BEPS, I think some of those things will come. I think some of the foreign companies will be looking at that. How is India progressing on BEPS? Also, how does dispute resolution happen? And is there anything around, indirect transfers or something that comes out? So yes, APAs have been slow to start with, but they now seem to be gaining momentum. I think 40 to 45 APAs have been cleared. So I think they would look at dispute resolution in a big way because, as has been mentioned, I think it's still a big challenge. And I think in many ways the Ishwar Committee and the AP Shah Committee addresses a lot of things around simplification and ease of doing business and everything. So I would say these would be the main things. I think we've discussed. I think on the tax rates and the incentives, how that progresses. That will be very important.
So a hike in service tax is a given, you think?
It's hard to say because I think they have had, good revenue buoyancy on service tax. So I don't know whether they will increase taxes.
In the hope to align it to the GST,
Yeah, I know that. I mean, I think the entire indirect tax thesis is that in the hope to align GST and Make in India. I mean, I think those are the two things. So because of that, I think excise duty and others they may not tinker with. To encourage Make in India, to correct some of the duty structures and things like that. But definitely on the service tax, I mean, I think there's always been talk, every year it's been lifted. But I do believe, I think on service tax, if they do raise the rates, the credit mechanism is very confusing. So I do hope that they clear the credit mechanism. There are lots of things, expenses that you incur on which credit is still not available. So as they align towards GST on the rate side, one does hope that they also align towards GST on its basic principles. So whether it's on telecom towers, whether it's on staff welfare expenses and things like that where credit is not available, I do hope that they bring that in.
Okay, let me go around the table now for quick wrap-up comments. And Mr. Bhaskar Pramanik, let me start by asking you your top 3 recommendations for the Finance Minister if he's watching.
So I think very clearly we need to leverage the existing investments which the IT industry has made. The second, I think, is that we need to do a lot more clarifications around the tax, and I think there's 2 points I just wanted to highlight. The Indian IT industry is still struggling with this whole concept of whether software should be service tax or it should be the sales tax, and at the present moment we're paying both and still not been resolved, with the promise that it will get resolved when the GST comes. And the third is I just wanted to highlight about the mutual agreement protocol, the MAPs, and to try and take care of some of the transfer pricing, including the advanced pricing agreement. So while there's this talk about 45 agreements have been resolved, it's still at a very small pace compared to what has been submitted. And I just want to make one submission, is that the safe harbor for APA is still far too high. At 25% and 30%, it is 2 times what it is in any other part of the world.
Okay, so those are the recommendations coming in from foreign investors. CB, very quickly, top 3 recommendations.
See, top 3 would be number 1, of course, the infrastructure focus needs to be back, and that's also needs to be related to the off-balance sheet items which can trigger off investment. Second, we need to have a strong rural focus, irrigation, and we discussed about that. And I think this budget, we need to see the revival of the rural economy. That's pulling us down. We need to do that. And third, definitely a reduction in corporate tax.
Definitely a reduction in corporate tax. Mr. Mazumdar, you can add to that list, sir.
Both of us being from CII, I guess.
All of you being from CII, sir. Are you excluding the rest of them?
we think the same, because what I wrote down was one thing I want to emphasize is, the government has been making investment, public investment. Unfortunately, private investment has not taken off. To really kick the demand up, the government needs to continue to make public investment. And keeping the fiscal deficit, doing it through off-balance sheet items. The second one was definitely action on the corporate tax, because this is something that would bring credibility
to the government's promise.
To the budget process. And the third one I do believe is they need to further put emphasis on the infra sector, because this is really what will give the economy a big kick.
Okay, Vinayak?
I'll use the time to not list the three which we've discussed, but to say that the discussion always is on disinvestment. Disinvestment implies unloading in the stocks in the market. Now remember, I don't see any discussion at all on divestment of state-owned assets.
So
strategic sales. I think we should have a complete target.
We may hear something, is what we're given to understand.
Sell them, and the foreign PE funds, the provident funds are hovering around wanting to pick up operating assets. We have a huge opportunity, so can we extend the debate beyond disinvestment to divestment of state-owned assets?
Well, the Minister of State for Finance did say that this process was atrophied under the previous regime, and the government is trying to revive that. We haven't seen the blueprint for strategic stake sales just yet, but perhaps we could see that. Yes, Anshuman.
Like top three, I would say infrastructure status to the housing, especially give any fiscal incentive to stimulate demand for the buyers as well as for developers, whatever incentives can be given. Number two, REIT. I think that will be a game changer. Everything is done. Dividend distribution tax has to be removed. There are people waiting in the wings to get in, and I think we can mobilize domestic as well as international funds there. And third is infrastructure. Whatever every budget allocates money, whatever money can be allocated infrastructure, it has impact on everybody else.
Okay, Mr. Sriram.
Well, I'd like to not talk of specifics. Everyone's talked of specifics. First, I'd say it's important that this budget create a positive sentiment. I think that's going to be very critical for really the mindset change which is required. One of the statements one has heard of is where on capital gains,
I was just coming to that.
1 year to 3 years. I think these are things which are not desirable at this time in any case. I think sentiment is very important for one. Second, I'd say, is center-state relations. That's not come in anywhere in our discussion. But if we see most of the issues are concurrent subjects, land, labor, agriculture, they're all concurrent. How can the government at the center really create some leverages to push states to get things done? Because if the center makes a policy change, states don't implement, the center gets badgered still. So how do they do that? I think that's important. And the third, I'm going to reiterate again, is implementation. I think implementation.
All right, we're totally out of time. So Rajiv Memani, final word to you. We've talked about what the budget should do. Do you expect long-term capital gains, kind of sort of what people are fearing at this point in time, these ugly surprises to show up?
I think maybe one or two will. Which one, I don't know. But I would say the government will also have to find ways of collecting revenues. So I would say this one would have been on the top of the list. But given where the stock markets are and the volatility,
they may change their mind.
They may want to pull their triggers back a bit on this one. Whether they will have some form of higher slab rate for taxation at income levels higher, one doesn't know. Some state, tinkering with gift tax or, things like that. So, whether it comes now or it comes, whether they hold it back given the, as you rightly said, because it will disturb.
Global as well as, the volatility.
And even in India, to be frank, whilst we're discussing that things have improved and but if you ask
that's not what you hear when you speak to all of you in private, is it?
In the sentiment on the ground, I think still, it's much better given all the global volatility and everything. But still, people don't feel buoyant, and I think it's important for people to start feeling buoyant before they start making investments.
Okay, very quickly, sir. We're totally out of time.
Best moment in time to invest in infrastructure because commodity prices, we have a 5-year window, invest right now. Second is, I think, continue with subsidy reform to get more resources in. And third, we haven't discussed, but exports, access to export markets and increase the capital base of the Exim Bank.
Absolutely, and I think that's a very important point that we've actually ended on. Exports continue to falter for the 15th straight month, and perhaps we could see some action in the budget to try and see what we could do to revive the export sector. Gentlemen, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for articulating sectorally and on the macro front what we should expect from the Finance Minister. All will be revealed on the 29th of February, so stay tuned to CNBC TV 18 as we bring you the Budget 2016. It is now or never.